5 differences between rich people and poor people. That's what we're covering in this video. Alright, so you guys are probably familiar with the whole debate between rich people and poor people. A lot of people tend to think that the problem with rich people is that they're greedy, who don't really care about anything but themselves, and that rich people are selfish. But that's actually quite far from the truth, and in this video we're going to actually go over 5 ways in which rich people are actually different from poor people. The first way in which rich people are different from poor people is in regards to the type of content that they expose themselves to. Whereas poor people will probably be watching sitcoms or drama series or entertaining cat videos on YouTube, rich people will be watching documentaries or educational movies. They'll be watching series that will teach them about business, for example, Suits or Billions. Speaking of Billions, that's one of the movies that's one of the series that pretty much every person that's interested in investing will probably want to watch. Billions basically follows the story of this hedge fund manager who is basically trying to outwit the SEC. He's a billionaire, of course, hence the name Billions, but he's involved in basically analyzing stocks, and the SEC is probably trying to actually shut him down. Now, there are a lot of things that you can learn from watching Billions in terms of just how to structure deals, how to kind of make different connections between different events that will affect different types of markets, as well as how to kind of negotiate different tactics, how to hire people, how to fire people, how to come to like amicable disagreements and yet still have like a continuing business relationships. So those are some of the things that you will learn from Billions. But rich people are always basically seeking out these types of content. So they'll be watching other shows like Suits, or they'll be watching movies like The Wolf of Wall Street or Money Never Sleeps. Rich people, they're the types who will be reading probably 3 or 4 different newspapers or 3 or 4 news websites on a daily basis. Poor people will be reading like the tabloids or fashion magazine or whatever is hot in like the Star and Gossip and all of that. Rich people expose themselves to books. It's said that the average CEO reads 52 books per year. That's a book a week. Now, if you think about that, think about just the amount of information that a person like that is going to be exposed to throughout the span of 1 year. And then imagine that person continuing that habit for the next 10 years. It's no wonder that they will ultimately become wealthy, because they're exposing themselves to all of these different ideas, all of these different authorities, learning from them, and then being basically tapping into the creative minds who are the authors of these books. So that's basically the first difference. The first difference is going to be the type of content that rich people expose themselves to, whereas poor people will expose themselves to content that basically doesn't help them, doesn't allow them to grow, and doesn't allow them to basically get to the next level. The second difference between rich people and poor people is in the type of conversations that they have. So typically you go into, say, any organization and you always hear about the water cooler stories. These are the people who are taking every single break that they can to basically gather at the water cooler and discuss the latest sports, or the latest drama on television, or the latest headline that was in the Star or the tabloid newspaper that we talked about in difference number 1. Rich people, on the other hand, have masterminds. Now, a mastermind is where you have a group of people who basically have a similar mindset, and what they're doing is they're coming together to share ideas and to share strategies and then build on how they can actually get to that next level. Rich people, the type of conversations that they have is going to be the type of conversation that's going to be giving you ideas. You'll also hear them probably arguing about different concepts as to how to actually strategize and be able to move themselves, each one in the group, that is, forward, such that they can be better the next time the mastermind actually meets. The conversations that rich people are always geared towards growth, and we can talk a little bit about the difference between the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. That's another big difference that you will find between rich people and poor people. Rich people have what is known as a growth mindset. They're not afraid to accept when they're wrong and to actually implement the corrective measures, take the responsibility for the fact that they were mistaken in the first place, and then move on. Whereas poor people will continue to blame and basically try to pass the buck around, try to pass the ball, try to put the responsibility on someone else. The third difference between rich people and poor people is, and this one relates to money, is their relationship with money. So rich people have a far different relationship with money than poor people do. For most poor people, their relationship with money is sort of like what we call a scarcity mentality, meaning they think that there is so little money in the world that if it is that one person becomes wealthy, then they must have either stolen, done something unethical, or taken advantage of somebody else in order to have accumulated their wealth. Rich people understand that money is first a mindset, and that you actually become rich by manifesting the wealth that you already see within your mind. The rich people's mentality towards money is that money is something that they create from being productive and from serving others. Whereas poor people, and I'm sure you probably heard this already, you'll hear them say things like money doesn't grow on trees. It actually does, because money is made of paper, which actually comes from trees. Or they'll tell you that money is the root of all evil, and that's not actually what the saying says. The real saying is that the love of money is the root of all evil. Or you'll hear them say that if you get too rich, then you're going to become corrupt. Some of the richest people in the world are actually some of the most philanthropic people. Think about people like Bill Gates and how much money they give to charities every year. Think about people like Warren Buffett, who has signed the Giving Pledge, which means that he's going to be giving away 90% of his wealth to charities over his lifetime. The truth is that rich people actually have a much healthier relationship with money than poor people do, and rich people actually give away a lot more money than poor people do. The fourth point is that rich people track their expenses. And this builds on the last point that we talked about in terms of rich people having a different relationship with money. Rich people pretty much know where every single dollar goes. And I should actually say that there's a difference between being rich and wealthy. But you can actually become wealthy, and by saying rich people, we're really talking about wealthy people here. But you build wealth by being able to track your expenses and then to make plans for your money. If you guys have never read the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, then that's a book that I highly encourage you all to read. I myself, I make it a point of duty to read that book at least twice every year. And one of the key points in that book is about tracking and managing your expenses. One of the cures for a lean purse, but one of them is that you should track your expenses such that you can control your expenditure. We're really talking about budgeting, but more than budgeting, we're talking about accounting for the money that you already have. Think about any large company. Now, large companies are actually mandated by the government to track their expenses and report to shareholders their audited financial statements. This is where somebody else comes in and looks at how well the company has been tracking their business expenses and their revenue. Rich people have the very same mentality towards their personal income. So a rich person will have a financial advisor who will come in and will basically re-evaluate all of their income and then assess their expenses to find out, okay, how much money do I actually have, what can I actually afford to spend on, and then how can I invest the difference in terms of how do I use that money to actually grow. On the other hand, you have poor people who basically try to spend every single bit of money that they have, or they squander it on like parties, or they will buy luxuries that they don't need. The point I'm making is that rich people track and plan their expenses and poor people don't. And then the last point that I want to make in regard to the difference between rich people and poor people is the fact that rich people have goals, whereas poor people have wishes. So one habit that I know a lot of rich people have is to, at the start of every year, to make either what is known as a vision board, or they make goals for the year. A friend of mine who's a multi-millionaire, if you take up his phone at any point in time, the first thing you're actually going to see on his screen is his top 10 goals for the year. A good book recommendation that I can give you guys to learn how to create goals and how to actually implement plans to achieve those goals is Brian Tracy's goal setting, and I'll leave a link to that book actually in the description. But getting back to the point here, rich people make goals for the year, whereas poor people, they'll make either a New Year's resolution, and then of course, you know, by the end of February they've forgotten what their resolution is, or worse, you'll hear them say, oh, I wish I had that, oh, I wish I had this, or oh, I wish that was me, or that should be me, which is even more toxic. But they don't have any written goals for themselves. And so that is one of the key differences between rich people and poor people. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Just before I close, let me just revise what the 5 differences are. So number 1, rich people have a different type of content that they expose themselves to. Poor people will expose themselves to tabloids. Rich people might expose themselves to books. Rich people have a different mentality around the type of conversations they'll have. Rich people, for example, will have masterminds, whereas poor people will just gather at the cooler and waste time talking about sports or whatever. The third difference is that rich people actually have a different relationship with money, in that they look at money as something that they create out of their minds, whereas poor people don't. They think money is a limited resource. Rich people actually plan their expenses and invest their money, whereas poor people spend their money and pretty much never adhere to a budget, and worse, probably never make plans for the money that they do have. And then last and finally, rich people have goals and poor people have wishes. Anyway guys, let me know if you know any other differences between rich people and poor people, and if you have any thoughts or comments, leave them in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next video.